Hi there. Welcome to the Healthy Church Staff Podcast. My name is Todd Rhoades. I am one of the co-founders over at chemistrystaffing.com and your host for the Healthy Church Staff Podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Today is a special day, a day that I've been looking forward to for, months actually. This project that I'm going to talk about today and give you a little bit of information on is something we've been working on at Chemistry Staffing for about the last 6 months. And actually, the whole project, probably about 2 years. It's our Healthy Church Staff Assessment. It's really the project that birthed this podcast. We did the first Healthy Church Staff Health Assessment last year in 2023. We did it again this spring and early summer in 2024. And today is a special day because we are releasing our full report of the 2024 Church Staff Health Assessment and all of the things that we found out. So for the next 2 weeks on this podcast, we're going to be digging into some of the things that we discovered, some of the things that we found out, some of the changes maybe that have happened in church staffs across the country in the last year, since the beginning of 2023 and since the pandemic. And that's actually what we're going to start today with, is unpacking some of the post-pandemic church staff dynamics. Now, I know if you're like me, man, if anybody ever says the word pandemic or COVID again, I'm likely to take a hostage. Actually, we have blamed a lot of things on COVID in our culture and in the church. And I think everybody's just tired of talking about it. But that doesn't change the fact that in many ways, the pandemic really did change so much in our churches. And we're a few years past the pandemic, but some of those long tail effects, there were short tail effects, but there are also some long tail effects that we need to deal with. And those are some of the things that we share in this 2024 Church Staff Health Assessment. Stay tuned. At the end of the podcast, I'm going to tell you how you can download your copy absolutely free. But let's take a look at really 4 things that we've found in the last 4 or 5 years that have changed as a result of what we've all experienced together in this pandemic and post-pandemic. Okay, the first finding, and this probably won't surprise you, but there are a shrinking number of church staff. And since the pandemic, we've seen just a larger number than normal of church staff members either retire early or just leave the ministry altogether. It could be burnout and exhaustion. It could be maybe changing priorities that led to some of these resignations. But it does seem, and I'm in the staffing business, we help churches all over the country staff their churches, and I work specifically with candidates. And it's been really interesting to see the dynamic change and actually the number of potential staff members change over the past 4 or 5 years because of COVID. All right, so that's the first thing, is there are less of us. And I don't think that probably really surprises anybody. The second kind of top-level finding that has really affected churches, and I don't think we talk about this enough, but particularly when it comes to staffing, is the economic shifts and inflation have really played a little bit of havoc with a lot of churches. The economy has changed drastically and dramatically since 2020. And that's affected churches' ability to hire staff and to sustain staff. With the rising costs of living and inflation, many churches are starting to feel the pressure on their budgets, which were already stretched thin due to declines in attendance and giving during the pandemic. But coming out 3, 4, 5 years later, with inflation and the current economic situation, it has really made it difficult for churches to hire staff because it's just more expensive to hire staff now. And with less staff there to begin with, it's a really trying time for churches that are trying to hire new staff members. And it's kind of eye-opening. We talk to churches all the time. It's eye-opening when what the replacement cost of a staff member or just to hire a new staff member, the prices have really changed. The salary prices have really gone up over the past few years. All right, we've got a shrinking number of church staff. We've got economic shifts. The third one is, we're seeing this across the board, and it's reluctance to relocate. And that's another trend that we've been noticing is just a decreased willingness among church staff, a lot of church staff anyway, to relocate. I often tell the story, pre-pandemic, I talk with candidates and I say, where do you want to go geographically? And probably the biggest answer everybody always has I'd like to be in this part of the country, or I'd like to be closer to family. Everybody always has those things. But for the most part, a lot of people just said, Todd, wherever God calls me, I'm willing to go. And I don't hear that answer nearly as much anymore. What I think the pandemic has done is it's caused us to want to be back, for many of us, closer to home, closer to family. And I think part of that is just a little bit of pushback from during the pandemic. If you were away from your family and you couldn't travel, it really made you feel isolated. So we're seeing, especially among the younger generation, as they start to get a little bit older and prioritize staying close to family, it really does make that harder for churches to recruit staff outside of their immediate area. And what I tell churches a lot is that what used to be, if you're looking for a new youth pastor or a new worship pastor, you could do a national search, and that could be quite effective. And they still are to some degree. But national searches are really turning into much more local and regional searches. So that's a shift that we've seen as well, because a lot of candidates these days are just a little bit more reluctant to pick up and move 6 states away. All right, so that's number 3. And then number 4 is the slow pace of adaptation. And this is, I could preach on this one, but I'll try to not get on my high horse here. While churches initially showed remarkable flexibility in response to the pandemic, when everything, I've talked about this before, everything shut down like within a couple days, no churches were able to meet. And churches had to rise to the occasion and show remarkable flexibility when it came to that. And I was really excited about, what's the church going to look like when this is all over? What kind of great innovations? How are we going to turn the corner maybe in some online ministry areas or things like that? Because everybody had to just kind of experiment and throw things up against the wall. But here's what we found is that many churches have reverted back to pre-pandemic ways, resisting further change. And we saw this as soon as churches were able to meet again. They just tossed a lot of the things maybe that they were learning and put them out the window because, hey, we can meet again. We know how to do this. So the hesitation to adapt to new realities is a challenge that we face as we move forward, continuing on. And I believe that this is something that we're still dealing with coming out of 2020. So the aftermath of the pandemic has left us in this new and uncharted landscape. Again, don't hear me. I'm not blaming everything that we're going through right now on the pandemic. Matter of fact, a lot of the things like the shrinking number of church staff, those kind of trends, those were happening for the last decades, probably 25 years. But the pandemic kind of brought that and showed the cracks and accelerated what was already happening there. Some of these changes aren't new, but it's like the pandemic has been like this magnifying glass, kind of identifying challenges that were already there. And we're seeing a significant decline in the number of individuals going into full-time ministry, many contemplating leaving their roles. The economic pressures are further complicating hiring, and churches now forced to pay more to attract qualified staff. And let's not forget the shift in priorities, many reevaluating their willingness to relocate and uproot for ministry roles. So if you're a church and you're hiring, how can you improve over this next year? These are easier said than done, okay? But the first is just maybe you need to reimagine your staffing model. With fewer people willing to relocate and a smaller pool of candidates, if you're looking to hire somebody, you might need to rethink your staffing model. It could be exploring some part-time or bivocational roles. It could be considering some remote work arrangements where feasible. It could be combining some positions. It could be not replacing someone when they leave, but looking for a different role that might fit your team. All of those kind of reimagining staff models, I think, is really important. And we in the church, can we talk? It's just we're really slow to do this. The second thing is invest in well-being of your staff, well-being it just has to be a priority. So provide resources for mental health support, spiritual health support, encourage rest and renewal, create a culture that values and appreciates your team. Focus on your financial health. Review your compensation packages. Look for creative ways that you can offer competitive benefits. This might mean reallocating some resources or finding some new ways to generate some income, but it's crucial to ensure that the staff feel valued and supported financially. We're going to dig into that in the next 2 weeks and on the podcast here, and you'll be able to read more about it in the assessment report when you download it. And then finally, let's be open to change. We need to stay flexible and open to change, whether it's adapting to these new ministry models, embracing different worship schedules or staff makeups, finding new ways to engage your community. Your willingness to adapt as a church will be key to thriving as we move forward. So the bottom line is, it is different. The last 5 years, it is different. We've seen more change than we've ever seen, and it's clear that we can't go back to the way things were. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not down on the church at all. Matter of fact, I'm really excited about the future of the church. This is an opportunity for us to innovate and to care for our teams in new ways and to reach new people. So I hope this has been helpful to you today. As I said, you can download the Church Staff Health Assessment Report. It is available over at the chemistrystaffing.website. Just go to chemistrystaffing.com/staffhealth. chemistrystaffing.com/staffhealth. And you can always reach out to me if there's any area of your staff that maybe you need somebody to come alongside you and reimagine some of those staffing models and staffing roles. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you. See if there's not some way that I or somebody on our team here at Chemistry can assist you and help you out in the future. And you can reach out to me anytime. Just email me at Todd Rhoades. That's an email address, but it's not the one you want to email me at podcast@chemistrystaffing. Okay, podcast@chemistrystaffing, and that will get to me. If you just email Todd Rhoades, that won't get you anywhere. Reminds me of Billy Graham's old address. And I'm dating myself. Do you remember Billy Graham's old address on all of the Crusades? It was just Billy Graham, Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I'm not quite that famous, so you're going to have to use the podcast at chemistrystaffing.com to catch me. Okay? Don't just do Todd Rhoades. That won't go anywhere. All right. Thanks so much for listening. We will be back tomorrow to unpack a little bit more of the Church Staff Health Assessment Report, and I will talk to you then.